On April 4, 1922, a local mechanic and a few concerned neighbors arrived at the remote Hinterkaifeck farmstead. The property was eerily quiet, yet there were undeniable signs of life: smoke drifting up from the chimney and the distinct, persistent howling of the family's dog. Stepping into the barn, the group discovered 4 members of the Gruber family. Their battered bodies had been stacked on top of one another and hastily concealed beneath a layer of hay and a heavy wooden door. Inside the main farmhouse, the discovery continued. The family's new maid, Maria, was found dead in her bedchamber on her very first day of work. Nearby, 2-year-old Joseph had been killed in his bassinet. While most perpetrators commit a crime of this scale and immediately flee, the evidence at Hinterkaifeck pointed to a different timeline. The killer remained on the property for days. Over the 72 hours following the massacre, the murderer slept in the victims' beds, ate the family's bread, carved meat from the pantry, and even fed the cattle. The intruder maintained a quiet agrarian routine, tending to the livestock and cooking in the kitchen, all while sharing the home with 6 decaying bodies. The terror began 6 months prior. The farm was profoundly isolated, bordering a dense forest. The previous maid abruptly quit her job, claiming she heard footsteps and voices echoing in the attic. By March 1922, the patriarch of the family, Andreas Gruber, found an unfamiliar Munich newspaper on his property. No one in the household, or even the surrounding village, subscribed to it. Physical breaches followed. A set of house keys vanished without explanation. A few days later, Gruber noticed fresh scratch marks gouged into the toolshed lock, as if someone attempted to pick it. The most chilling sign appeared just before the massacre. Gruber discovered a trail of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the edge of the woods directly to the farm's machine room. There were no footprints leading back out. Gruber described these events to his neighbors, but he stubbornly refused to notify the local police or accept any outside help. These events suggest the massacre was the planned climax of a meticulous stalking campaign, orchestrated by a predator who had already turned the isolated farm into a cage. On the evening of March 31st, the killer lured Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and 7-year-old Cecilia out of the house and into the barn through the stable, one by one. In the darkness of the barn, the assailant struck them down using a heavy, homemade mattock, a thick farming tool with a pick and cutter blade that Andreas had crafted himself. The killer then entered the living quarters to eliminate the remaining witnesses, striking the new maid in her bedroom before turning the heavy blade on the sleeping toddler in his crib. Autopsy reports revealed a horrifying detail about the events in the barn. 7-year-old Cecilia survived the initial attack for several hours, eventually tearing out clumps of her own hair in terror while trapped in the hayloft. Investigators eventually found large sums of cash in plain sight throughout the house. The killer had left it all behind. The choice to leave the money untouched, combined with the methodical nature of the violence, points to a perpetrator driven by a specific, personal grievance. When authorities arrived, they faced a severely compromised crime scene. By living there for 3 days, the killer wiped away the forensic record. The investigation soon uncovered a dark family history. Andreas and his daughter Victoria had a court-documented history of incest, leaving the paternity of young Joseph a subject of bitter local dispute. This cast suspicion on Lawrence Schlittenbauer, a neighbor and Victoria's former lover. His behavior during the search was highly irregular. He moved the bodies before police arrived, and allegedly used a missing house key to open the front door. Another theory involved Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel. Though reported killed in the trenches in 1914, his body was never found. Some locals firmly believed he survived the war and returned home, eventually killing the family after discovering Victoria's pregnancy. Others proposed that Andreas Gruber himself snapped and murdered his family, only to be killed by a third party who discovered the slaughter and chose to hide the truth. The investigation failed because the farm was a closed environment of abuse, where nearly everyone in the family circle had a viable, deeply personal reason for murder. Physical evidence of the case has long since vanished. The victims' skulls were sent to a Munich lab for analysis and were lost during the devastation of World War II. Less than a year after the massacre, the entire Hinterkaifeck farmstead was demolished, erasing the scene of the crime forever. Today, Hinterkaifeck endures as a primal warning. In this absolute isolation, there are no witnesses and no rescuers. leaving them entirely at the mercy of whatever emerges from the dark.